let's go to Q&A. Pete, I think you're going to take the lead on this.
Okay, thank you, Carl. That was fantastic. Also, this was our first intersmig collaboration, and I want to thank all the speakers. I was very, very happy and impressed with the presentations. We had a lot of great questions, and given that we had this panel, people were very anxious to answer the questions as they came up. One was, why don't you guys share your DFMEAs? We don't know what your key design inputs or outcomes are that could go into our DFMEA. So I'm going to take one stab at that. I tried to put an answer in there in the chat. DFMEAs are very much considered proprietary by the OEMs. I cannot speak for every OEM of AESQ. Some of us will provide the critical features that come out of the DFMEA, put that in the hands of the supplier to account for those features in their flow diagrams, PFMEAs, and control plans. So that is one thing that can be done, but generally speaking, we do not provide out a DFMEA as a rule. It's proprietary. So now, any questions live? Would anyone like to ask or use the chat? We just had one.
I guess, Pete, just on the DFMEA side of things,
Yes, sir.
It's certainly working in the supply chain, seeing it across the patch. I'm lucky enough to get across all the different functions and stuff. I don't know if Rob would add anything to this as a seasoned design person. I won't say design engineer because you come from all different roles in the world of design. I think one thing what is important is that a link between DFMEA and a cascade, certainly to make Print World, is the fact of the recognition of key product characteristics. I think you did a nice little pitch or mention, Pete, about Pratt & Whitney. I think you called it a characteristics list or something. I forget the exact title. So where we might not be viewing exactly the FMEA, there is a cascade going on about through at a characteristic level. I don't know if any of the other guys want to add to that.
There's certain information that could be presented and is helpful to the supplier in performing their PFMEAs. So amongst that is actually the transmission of the bill of characteristics, if you like, you know, the rows in the CM and the associated KC definition that might go on top of that, because that indicates a level of importance and the severities that might be scored in a PFMEA. And it also gives the objective function, if you like, for the PFMEA, because you're aiming to achieve those characteristics. So that is important information. There may be other things that could be provided. So if I would say it's helpful to have DFMEA information passing into the supply chain if that's possible. But also always we should be prepared to answer a question that comes up about the importance of a particular characteristic, because that is just part of good into team working, isn't it?
Okay, we had another question around the use of part families, and when you have low volumes, you can't always collect enough data points to provide an adequate statistical process control study. So we get that question quite a bit. Now, when you're dealing with spacesuits for astronauts, that's going to be a tough one to deal with SPC on a regular basis. That's an extreme on the extreme end. But there are a lot of times where we manufacture in part families where different part numbers go through a common set of processes, and where we could utilize target to nominal type strategies. we have case study built into RM 13006 that addresses that very issue. So utilization of group charts, target to nominal charts. There was a very good book written by two gentlemen that authored D19000 from Boeing back in the 90s called Innovative Control Charts, that gets into low volumes and strategies around how to implement process control techniques like SPC when you have low volumes and want to, group parts, like parts, into a family. So again, there's a lot of good resources around that, and please check RM 13006. And I don't know if anyone else would like to respond to that particular question.
I'll add a few little points on this, because it is, as I said, I've been lucky enough to get involved with all sorts of business areas in our business, some which are significantly low volumes because of the nature of what they do. A few pointers. We between first article and SMIG and the APQP PPAP one, we're actually planning to do a first article and PPAP one of these as well. And I'm pointing to that because I think we kind of float into that validation world, and that's going to give some pointers about thinking about generally about dealing with approach to validation and number of parts. The second piece I would pick on is we're challenged by number of parts when we need to apply SBC, and the pointers the guys are giving with when we talk about APQP and PPAP, we're talking initial process studies, and the baseline for initial process studies is when something is a product key characteristic. That's the requirement, the baseline, the must have. The beyond that is it actually makes sense to capture more information, SBC-wise, around other characteristics. But that's when you get these challenging bits. So the strategies that Pete's referring to that makes you think about how you can deal with those. But the other, on the flip side, also to think about is we also talked about dimensional and non-dimensional results. I find, and the reason I made the connection back to the first article is because we really want to get some of these messages over. When we talk about PPAP, we are talking about collecting a number of samples of data. It could be 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 25. What we're talking about, though, is collect some data to just understand the performance of the process. An example of a metric of performance of process is defects per unit. All right, we can that doesn't, you can do that over 5 parts if you like. I know some of the statistical friends I have will tell me off for saying that sort of thing. You should, do it absolutely. But I come in this pragmatic world of, before PPAP, we've only relied on first article, and effectively first article only really looked at one part. So if you get more data on more than one part, that's a good thing because it's giving us some feel about confidence. Statistically, we might not be hitting the ideal mark, but just the practice of looking at dimensional, non-dimensional results and simply saying, what's our process performance when we talk about defects per unit, as an example, and are we getting to where we are, is a nice step forwards. It's a nice compromise between the challenges of very few parts and the actual desire to have lots and lots of parts. But there are strategies which Pete's pointing to, but it's also how we think about this stuff. The other thing we'll be picking up on in the PPAP fair one is other techniques like process control, surveillance activities and stuff, which is going in, witnessing stuff. And they all help contribute, mitigate against those numbers. That was just a little bit I thought I'd add in.
Yeah, and related to the question from Sam, you can certainly calculate PP and PPK for data combined from different part numbers on similar features. As long as they're going through that same process, they share, common traits, material, tolerances. They don't have to be exact. They need to be similar. And you can get statistical tests that we can do that determine whether or not they are the same. But again, the control chart itself will tell you that. So it's very simple to do. And again, I point you to the reference manual case study in 1306. We did have another question relative to the RMs being updated to reflect, excuse me, revision A. And put in the chat that a number of them are being worked on right now. And we're expecting to get them published before the end of the year. Those that really had a lot of impact to the SMIG teams all contributed to changes in AS 13100 revision A. In fact, that was one of the presentations at the recent supplier conference in Zhezhov. And those particular SMIGs will be updating their reference manuals. Won't be anything, in my opinion, that should prevent anyone from doing their compliance matrix, the RM 13009. Again, compliance matrix goes against the requirements document, not the reference manuals. 13100 will always point to the reference manuals as a means of guidance. Reference manuals are not requirements, though, so just be careful of that. They're not requirements. And I don't know if there's any other opinion or comment on that. Okay. Any other questions, folks? Feel free. So far, I think we've covered them all. I see Rob was busy.
I guess the pointer, Pete, is with it the last minute or so of it. We intend to sort of take these questions and then, you know, publish something which will give you a bit more, hopefully, comprehension. And I think it's really worth highlighting it if you didn't pick up. You know, there's a number of times we flagged up a table. What we've done against the elements is to put real pointers against these individual manuals. If you like, you can follow the mapping of those. There are guidance tables which says, you know, for this element, go and have a look at this chapter, this diagram, and this page. That's sort of the way we've tried to position some of this to help you. There is lots of knowledge in the gold books. You know, originally when they were created, I think there was over 100 SMEs across the whole network what contribute to them. And it's always dynamic, isn't it, Pete? We try and keep them up to date as much as possible. They are guidance and good practice. So it's not about, it's a compliance. They're good practices in there. And there's other supplementary pieces that come out. Always promote people to go to the supplement site page, not only look at the gold books, but there's really good stuff coming out from the different teams in templates, guidance documents, handy little walkaways, stuff like that, you know, you can actually use.
Well, with that said, thank you so much, Carl and team. We are at the hour. We had 70 people on at one point, and I want to thank all of you who participated and joined us today. We will have more of these types of webinars coming up in the future. We're working on that now. And again, take at least 3 things that you may have gotten out of this. Discuss with, many of you showed up with fellow members from your company. What were the 3 top things that you could take back and start working on right now? That timing chart, you know, the activities diagram, the knowledge of APQP is around the activities, PPAP is the objective evidence. These are all key lessons. Prevention versus detection, mistake proofing versus inspection. So you were drinking from a fire hose. We provided a lot. Again, we thought it was all worth sharing. And thank you all very much. Have a great rest of the day, everyone.